here with audience there, and an aisle there with audience there. If I'm standing here, the audience over here gets me pretty much profile. You all get me full front, and this aisle gets about a quarter of me. So this side. So the audience is seeing me. However, in that kind of staging, there would generally be someone also who's right here. So then they're getting me full front, they're getting me about a quarter or so of me, and they're getting me profile. So everybody in the audience has a different perspective on the scene, but they're all able to see at least one person of the two people. And so that's one of the things that I have to think about is where are people going to be positioned so that everybody gets the whole story. So that's the difference of what would be a general proscenium story, which is like the comment that you made, versus what you'll see in the Williams Theater, those of you that come to see the work. So I guess that would be my overall comment on space.
So like, are you drawing the circles on a page with lines?
I should have brought that with me. Sort of. I mean, this it's different every time, and like the mechanical scene with where Puck is turned bottom into an ass, and they're running around. I actually had to use colors because of how because first I just said, okay, at this point you're going to just run around crazy and all of that, and I've trained them. Actors either in class or ensemble work what we do of to how to take care of the space, but that scene is so chaotic that I ultimately had to basically do football plays and say, at this moment, this is what you're doing, and each actor had a different color. So Quince had a color, the lion had a color, and so I said, okay, you're going to come this way, you're going to run around this panel, see yourself in the mirror and scream, and then come over here, and then you're going to do this. And Ruben, who's playing the lion, is really funny. Bottom is basically center at that point. And so while they're all running around, I just said, okay, you're gonna run, you just run this way and see him and then scream and then try to run away and then you just keep seeing him. So trying to find what the humor is. So, so our set, or the theater, is like this. And so this area is the proscenium arch, which starts right here and right here, and then it goes over the stage. So there's audience here, kind of here, big audience here, and then a big audience over here. So those are the three sides of the stage. There's actually a grid on the stage, because our set design, one of the thoughts that I had in the play was what is reality and what is fantasy? And whose dream is it? Are the court people dreaming about the fairy people, or are the people in the forest dreaming about the court? And so it's kind of like Alice through the looking glass, or the kids through the wardrobe, or any of those plays or movies where reality is changing. To me, that's what I'm focusing on this time around. This is the third time I've directed the play. And all three are different, and this is probably the most adventurous for a number of reasons, but all three have been adventurous in one way or another. So there's this grid work of squares that cover this stage. And like every other one of them, missed that one. So every other one, the ones that are marked would be like black marble, and so the set designer and the paint crew and the students who are involved in the crew are painting those squares to look like marble. And so that's there. All of these empty squares are mirrors. And then back here, there are 9 mirror panels in various places here, and then in between those and behind them are 9 fabric panels. 3 of the fabric panels move, and all 9 of the mirror panels move. And so I'm trying to figure out in this, where are the mirror panels going to be for this section, where are they going to be for this section, how far can we get them off? And the panels aren't even up yet. So we're using these 1x4 sticks and say, this is where a panel is, this is where a panel is, so that I have at least an idea. The fabric panels got up this week, so we're actually able to start moving them, or at the end of last week, we're able to start moving them around. But then we have these sticks, and so whoever's moving them, we've actually started working on the choreography of how these mirrors move throughout the play. And when I say mirrors, they're giant, like 20-foot mirrors. So they start at the floor level and go up into the grid. So it's really cool, the designer who created that. So yeah, it's very fun to then, when are we going to use the grid and when are we not? Because it's going to be there, so you'll be able to see it. So the court is very regimented, very strict in how that happens. So very rarely will they make too many curved lines. Most of the times when they're talking to people, they're actually dead center in one of these squares. So in that sense, I mean, there is a little bit, I guess, of that like kind of football play or basketball play or marching band where you go in how you're doing that. So there is, but certainly in those crazy scenes where there's a lot happening, those are much more choreographed, specifically so. And then the other scenes, I have it in my head of where sometimes I draw it out, sometimes I have it in my head, and we stage it. And then it's a lot of it is also, I've set everything up, and if I've set it up right, I've set it up in a way that all of the actors can be a creative input into what's happening in the show. That to me is much more fun because I think theater is a collaborative art. And so how am I collaborating with the artists? I've trained a lot of them in class. The first 2 weeks we did a lot of this physical dramaturgy work that I've kind of created for this particular show. And dramaturgy, has anyone heard that word? Dramaturgy is kind of, they're much more used in Europe. A dramaturg who is supposed to be like the expert on dramatic structure, dramatic literature, research and analysis. A lot of times in the United States, the director is responsible for that. And so it's taking all of this stuff that you've probably talked about, what's language, how to use words in your class. We're doing a lot of that same things. How do we get that into the actor's body so that they can be able to communicate not only with their words, but with their bodies, with their sound, and how do they commit fully to those so that you all get a very active story in the audience. So we spent 2 weeks just working on that, and that was the 2 weeks before spring break. And then right after spring break, then we started working with the text. We did a lot of text work, also reading and then getting up and playing. But then once spring break was done, then we were starting the actual staging of that. And so then things happen and I get things set up and then something happens and I'm like, yeah, let's keep that, or no, that's not working anymore, so we have to change that. So there's a lot of like what you might do in science classes of trial and error. I think this will work. This is what I do before every rehearsal. This isn't working, so let's fix that. I think that'll work. If it doesn't, then we start experimenting space. And then there are all these things of happy accidents. So we were talking when you said the broken lantern. I've given the mechanicals in the play within the play this kind of direction of what's happening while the court is talking. Because you've read the play, so you know the court is constantly talking while the actors are trying to perform, being very rude to audience members. So they're doing that. What are the actors doing? They can't just be waiting there. Like you were saying, they don't just stand there. So they're responding to the fact that this audience is talking about them, talking to them, doing whatever, and they're like, I don't know how to do, we didn't rehearse this. And so they're all kind of freaking out at times and panicking. And so I just said, okay, until we get to this line, because I said, Ruben, okay, so what's happening? So a lot of times I'm asking actors, what are their thoughts about this particular moment? And then I try to figure out a way to bring that up or heighten that. I certainly have my ideas as well, and we test those, and if they don't work, then we try something else. If they do work, we keep that. So, but we're at this point now where we're getting close, we're memorized now, or mostly memorized, and we're happy. So I said, what's happening for you, Ruben? He said, well, I don't like the fact that they're talking about us. I'm like, so what do you want? And he's like, well, I kind of want to leave. And I'm like, well, then do it. I mean, we got all these doors, just walk off. And he's like, oh, okay. And I said, and we'll see what Chase does, because Chase is playing Quince. And so I've decided that Quince is watching the play on stage as opposed to going off stage. So he can respond to, everyone saying Linus is to him wrong and all of that. So he can respond to those. So we've kind of thrown the director who's responding into the show as well. And so he's trying to maintain some semblance of the performance that he created for the Duke. And so he's trying to argue with them, trying to push them back, and had him push the moonshine dead center just before he's like, this lanthorn doth the horn and moon present. And as he did that, because of this wrestling that they were doing, the bottom of the lantern fell off the handle and crashed to the floor, and it was the most hysterical thing in the world. Because you'd seen them fighting, and then there was this complete stillness, boom. And everybody in rehearsal, because we had some tech people there watching as well, and I said in notes, I'm like, okay, so now we have to figure out a way to do that every night. So I said to our stage manager, that's the note, you have to figure out how to have a breakaway lantern that can be put back together. And so we were talking about that in the production meeting. That's a little bit easier to maybe figure out a way. Last night, and Freddie doesn't know that I'm going to tell him this, he probably won't be able to do this, but last night, the mantle, which is like a scarf, the thing that Flute has over to be the woman, and that lion bloodies with his bloody mouth, that flies up in the air when the lion screams. Or when the lion roars and he screams and runs off. Well, it fell, somehow it happened that it fell on his foot, and so he's running off like this, and the mantle's following him off, which is, like toilet paper on the back of a shoe or something. That's funny. And so I'm like, if you can do that every night, that would be great. That's a more luck thing if it happens. But, we'll certainly try it, because then he had to get the mantle from off stage, or where he was, all the way back to center for the lion to go for the well-mouthed one. So there's a lot of staging things that are, just lucky, and they happen. So I guess that's open it up to you guys. Yeah.
So would you say your goal is to clearly show Shakespeare's true what he was trying to show, or your interpretation of what he was?
It's totally my interpretation, and I think Shakespeare's great at that. Shakespeare's plays are just full of immense ideas. And that's why I think I can direct this 3 times. I've directed it in different times in my life, so I've also been in it 3 times.
What was the difference between this play and the other one?
The first time the adventure was, I had never directed Shakespeare before, ever. And so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna start with Midsummer, because I've been in it once. And I didn't have a great experience in the rehearsal process. I had a great experience in the performance, but not the rehearsal process. I'm like, okay, the goal for my success of this is to tell a clear story and to make it fun for the actors. Because it was not, the process when I was in it was not fun, because we were there every single night. There were nights where we did nothing at the rehearsal, and I'm like, that's a waste of time. So how can I use my actors' time in the best way possible so that they're having a good time? And how can I tell the story? And so it is about, what do I think the story is? So I'm trying to give the audience always a clear story of what it is that you're seeing, so you know what is happening in the story. But then it's also, I'm interpreting what I think the whole play is about, and then all of the actors are interpreting their characters, and their job is to kind of figure out a way to make their interpretation fit in the world of the play that we've all created, but that started with my overall ideas. And then they might come up with something that I hadn't thought about, which is, I hope, is always the case. I'm like, oh, that's good. How can we change that? Keep what you're doing, but modify it in such a way that it actually fits in the story. The first time I directed it, I was not sure how many men we would have, because where I was, there was a summer theater, and they took a lot of men from where I was. And we had never had summer theater for a long time, at least in the town where I was. This is when I was in grad school, and they hadn't had summer theater, so I'm like, we should have summer theater, let's do it. If I'm gonna be stuck in this godforsaken place, I was in Tallahassee. So Tallahassee in the summer, bleh, there's no beaches, the wind is at the, on the ocean or the Gulf, and so it's just bleh. And I'm like, if I'm gonna be stuck in bleh, I'm gonna have some fun. So we created the show. My wife and I did it together. She was actually in it, she played Robin Starkland. So the first time, I thought I would have a lot of women. So my first thought was, let's do this the opposite of Shakespeare, and let's just cast all women in all of these roles. And then there were some men that were going to be in town that I knew were really good actors, and they were like, can we audition? And I'm like, sure, why not? And so we'll see what happens. So it ended, but I knew things that what I was going to cast. I knew I wanted the mechanicals to be some kind of split, either 3 and 3, 3 men and 3 women, or 4 women and 2 men. And so there were enough women that auditioned that were talented that I could do that. And so with that production, there was a lot of kind of, it wasn't really cross-gender because they were women playing women.
in what was happening. But there were women playing the mechanical roles, there was a woman playing Puck, and the thing that I really wanted, there's still at least 2 more Midsummers in me, because I know I want to explore this idea that I started 20 years ago, and thought about it some for this one, but I'm like, no, this is not what I'm exploring right now. And there's something that I want to do with the mechanicals that I'm not doing with this now either. So the Lysander was a woman. And because I'm looking at why does Aegeus hate Lysander? It doesn't make any sense. And in Shakespeare's day, they wouldn't have cared. It was a plot device. Dad has to hate this one and like this one, so they'll go out into the woods. Because Freud hadn't been around yet. And so there was no psychological analysis or anything. It was like, oh, I don't like him? Okay, I don't like you. Now we kind of start asking those questions as to why. And I'm like, okay, if the court is this really rigid Athenian, this is the way you have to behave, the dad is not going to want Hermia with another woman. He's going to want him with a man. And so that makes sense. I don't think I really explored that relationship between Hermia and Lysander fully. So I'm still interested to see what happens. So that was the adventure there, was I don't know what to do with Shakespeare as a director, so I have to figure it out. And we had a blast. Also, we only had 4 weeks of rehearsal, where this time we've had more like 6.5 actually, maybe 7 with the 2, because we added a week at the beginning. So I had enough time to really explore this physically and then start to put it together. The second time I directed it was in a huge outdoor space, so it was outdoors, so that just became, how do we do this outside and make sure everyone can hear and make sure everyone can see. And then this one is probably the most adventurous, because this set, while the set looks simple, it's just a wide open space, so the vast open space of that floor, and then just these kind of walls in the back. It looks very simple, but it's taken forever to figure out, okay, how do we move these? Okay, I know what that's happening, but I'm not going to like that once I eventually see it, so we need to move this panel over here.
So am I understanding correctly, there's no visual set difference between the forest and the court?
None at all. It's all done with light. Light and costumes. Because I think, because there's so much movement in the space, that if there were too many obstacles, and I'm often going to use an open space, because I think it's very interesting to see how actors can transform the space with how they're behaving in the space. So yeah, there's no difference, except the lights. And there will be stark differences that you will, I think it's going to be very clear when you're in court and when you're in the forest and when you're in the house of Quince or any of that. But some of that is how we're using the panels, some of it's how we're using light and how light will reflect off of the panels, how people will reflect off of the panels. So we're not hiding the fact that they're reflective surfaces, so we're using everything in any possible way. This is the first time that I've pretty much stuck to the gender of the character, which I've never done, so I was interested in seeing, okay, well what happens if you do get 6 men together who are coming together to put on a play? And what is that dynamic like? It's totally different than when it's 4 women and 2 men. And I think the second time ended up being 4 women and 2 men also. Maybe it was 3 and 3. I can't remember that now. But I was like, okay, I want to see 6. I've also never cast Puck as a man, so I'm like, okay, I should do that if we have the actor that can do it. So that the only difference is Philostrate, who is the Duke's kind of right-hand man, is now the right-hand woman. And she's in a dress. So it's not her playing a man like in Shakespeare's days, it's a woman. So I have changed the gender of that, but haven't changed the name, so it's not going to be Philostrata or whatever. That doesn't stand as well with the language. So it's still Philostrate. But that's the only difference. So it's really interesting to me to say, and it's not necessarily more traditional, it's just that's what I wanted to explore this time. So yeah, that's how I think this one is that's how the first one was adventurous, the second one is, and this is just giant. I mean, it's like a musical. I think Shakespeare is like a musical, because there's a lot of music. I mean, there's a couple of dances, and we've added a dance into this as well. We're doing all of the choreography for that this week. We've added a big fight, so there is a big sword fight in the show, which I think is really exciting. If you want me to ruin the surprise, I can tell you where it is. But there's that. So there's a lot of things, and I compare Shakespeare to musical theater all the time, because in a musical theater, you have the book, so this is a book musical, so not like Les Miserables or Cats or anything like that, but in a book musical like Oklahoma, you have lines, and then when the emotion can't contain it anymore, they burst into song. So characters have this, they have this emotion, and it just comes out singing. The same thing happens in Shakespeare. Shakespeare's characters are speaking prose, so no rhyme verse, not blank verse, nothing. So like what the mechanicals speak in this particular play. Speaking prose, when the emotion there can't handle it anymore, they burst into blank verse. So they burst into verse. But the thing that's great about Shakespeare is when the emotion can't handle it again, I look at it musical theater squared, is what I call Shakespeare. So you have prose, then it bursts into blank verse, and when the language is no longer able to sustain the emotion that's happening, the characters jump into rhymed verse. So the rhymed couplets that happen, where they start sharing lines, where somebody says this, oh, spite, too old to be prostitute, and all of this stuff that Hermia and Lysander do, and Hermia and Helena do. The emotions are just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and Shakespeare allows you to do that. So that's why I compare it to musical theater. And staging this with all this moving scenery, even though it seems simple, it's not.
How do you make any changes? I know you have like a lot of shows. So from like the first show to the last show, do you make any changes?
You mean, so like what we'll do on opening night versus what will be closing night? That's a really good question. And I would say there's no changes and yet everything changes. We have worked for, which will be like 7 weeks, to create what everyone will see on opening night. At that point in theater, it should be solid. So every audience should get what happened on opening night so that everyone has seen the same show. However, it's not like a movie where you just put it in again. So things happen in a different way. The prep might have been slightly different, and I am most interested in the communication between people. So what is happening between Theseus and Hippolyta in this moment is going to be slightly different than it was yesterday, so I don't want them to and you'll actually get to see this because it happens in the play within a play. I want them to respond to what's actually happening on stage and responding how they actually feel with the people that are there. Have any of you seen the play or the movie Noises Off? It's a crazy play about theater. Yeah. So you know the scene where the bag, no bag? So what happens in that play is there's a bunch of stuff happening and it's a farce. There's a bunch of things happening off stage and on stage. And there's this table up on the balcony level or the second level of the house. And one of the characters puts a bag on it and then turns away and someone from behind the door grabs it. And then she's like, freaks out, there's no bag, where did the bag go? And then she turns around and the bag gets put back and she's like, bag, how did the bag get here? And she's freaking out. Well, and that's what you learn in Act 1. You learn how it's supposed to go. Then in Act 2, you see everything from backstage and it's totally quiet. It's the funniest thing. And then Act 3 is when they've been producing the play for a long time and everything goes wrong during the play. So what happens, and they're being really mean to each other, tying shoes together and all of these things. So what happens is the bag is supposed to be gone when she turns away, but when she turns back, the bag is there. And she looks at it and she's like, no bag! Because that's her line and that's her action. And so it becomes funny because the audience already knows what the joke is, so they see it and she says no bag and it brings down the house. So then she's turning around and the bag disappears and then she's like, bag! And there's no bag there. So it's funny, but that's what's wrong with that kind of acting. You do whatever you did the day before and you're not paying attention to what's actually happening on stage. I think that's kind of deadly theater. So I don't like that. So it does change every day because how I'm dealing with you today is going to be slightly different. And if you're paying attention, how you deal with me is going to be slightly different. So whenever you come, you will see exactly the same show. But what's great about theater is you will see a completely different show that is only for you. And something may have happened in your performance that didn't happen in someone else's performance. So you say, oh, you remember that point when the lantern broke? Oh yeah, well it happened, and hopefully that will happen every night, unless we can't figure out how to do it, and then it will be some other joke. But that's how it's, I think, different. You had a question?
You talked about like prose and then blank versus blank verse, so I'm assuming you're using the original Shakespearean language.
Absolutely, yeah. I've cut a few lines either for timing or for sense, some things that are so archaic that I don't think the audience will get them. So like, we shouldn't say them. But that was a hard process along, what am I gonna get rid of? But it's not much. I mean, I think you would be hard, unless you know this play really well, I don't think you'll notice anything being cut. If you memorize it all, then of course you will. And I did cut one of, that what? A+. That's right. I did cut one of Lysander's lines in his monologue, Content with Hermia. I do here repent the tedious moments I with her have spent. I did cut one line, but the actor who is playing Lysander had done that monologue in one of my classes last year and also used it for his audition, and he kept adding it. I'm like, you're doing it right. It makes sense, so just keep it. I don't care. So I'm very open in rehearsal. If something's working, staying. If it's not working, we're gonna figure it out. If it's not working by the time we open, it's probably gone. So there may be things that get cut between here and next Friday, if something happens technically, or if the mechanicals can get to a certain place faster, that I don't want the audience waiting. So there may be little minor adjustments in the text over the next 2 weeks, but it's pretty much all there. So yeah, that's a great question.
I was just wondering why, like, you say you have 2 more Midsummers to go, like you could do it 2 more times, but why don't you put everything in this one, or will they contradict each other?
No, and there could be in the second one, in the other one, because I still want to explore Lysander as a woman. I don't think I fully experienced all of that, and that was the first Shakespeare, and I was younger then, and I was like, oh, this will be cool, but I don't think we did everything that we could with that. So I'm interested in doing that. I didn't want to do that with this one, because I was really looking at, okay, all of the men are men, all of the women are women, and let's see what happens, because I've never done that before. And so I'm interested to see what happens. So that one can't happen there. The other thing that I'm interested in with the mechanicals, that I started to play with the cast we have. I love our mechanical cast, and so I wouldn't do what I would do for a number of reasons. One is because they're the ones that auditioned, and I didn't put out the feelers that I'm thinking about this. I wanted to see who would come. But also, we're a university, and if I can cast students, I'm gonna do that. The other thing that I want to do with the mechanicals is cast them with like 70 and 80-year-olds. I would really like to, except for flute. So I really want to take that idea of Shakespeare's, this is a company of people that have been working together for a long time. So that the mechanicals, they've been working together for 50 years, and they know everything about each other. They have tons of inside jokes.